Good afternoon, namaste. Welcome back, everybody, to our day 2, session 5. I am Satya Pulkuri, your host for this session. I am a research associate for the forum. Our 5th session is on China's non-kinetic warfare and multi-domain approach. So without any further ado, I extend a warm welcome to our session chair. Major General Naresh Badhani was commissioned into the artillery, commanded an infantry brigade in the northeast, an infantry division in the western sector, Chief of Staff 16 Corps and MGGS Northern Command. He is an alumnus of the Defense Services Staff College, College of Defense Management, and the National Defense College, New Delhi. The officer has a doctorate in disaster management and regularly contributes his knowledge and experience in various forums. He currently works full-time in a corporate and is based in Delhi NCR. Now, let's welcome our key speakers. We have Mr. Salvatore Babones, Major General Dr. P.K. Chakravorty, Colonel Pavithran Rajan. We all are delighted to have you all today. Now, I hand over the floor to Session Chair. Over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you so much. Firstly, it's an honor for me, and a big thank you to INDIC Research Forum for inviting me to chair the session. Undoubtedly an extremely interesting session. And the best is the panel is so filled with galaxies. And Maj Gen Chakravorty and Pavithran Rajan, I know their capabilities and their professionalism since many, many years. And a warm welcome to Salvatore Babones. And as seen from your CV, I'm sure we will all gain from whatever you say. My only request is that we have, in fact, I think you had to go early, and my apologies, because I was told that you have to leave by 2:30 India time, and it's already 8 minutes past the time you had to leave. So without much ado, I'll hand over the stage to you, Salvatore, and please finish whenever you need to. And thereafter, then we will decide how much time we have, and then we'll carry on from there. And if in case there are any questions for Salvatore, we will take it on. In case you have the time, we'll request you to take it. Otherwise, we will reply by mail to the people asking those questions. Thank you so much. Stage is on for you.
You're very kind. Thank you. And I'm sorry that I will have to leave, but I will stay for questions and answers. I apologize to have such a tight schedule today.
Thank you.
You asked me to speak on China's influence on global academic institutions. And the obvious place to start is the Confucius Institutes. There are, no one knows the exact number, around 600 Confucius Institutes around the world. There may be a fewer today, some have been closing. They teach Chinese language. They sometimes teach specialties like Chinese medicine or calligraphy. They also have Confucius classrooms in schools. So it's not just Confucius Institutes at universities, it's also Confucius classrooms at schools. Now, these programs are intended to help fill specialist gaps. A lot of people want to learn Chinese, and there aren't enough Chinese instructors in countries like Australia, the United States, or indeed in Latin America or Sub-Saharan Africa. However, these Confucius Institutes have entirely opaque finances. In fact, the few Confucius Institute agreements that we've seen published actually have written into the agreement, you cannot publish this agreement. So they're intentionally opaque. They're usually set up outside the university. So most university-based Confucius Institutes, while they sit on the campus of a university, are not part of the university. That's further intended to shield them from scrutiny. At a university like mine, I teach at the University of Sydney in Australia, the academic board would have direct oversight over all academic programs, but that does not include the Confucius Institute because it's not an academic program of the university. It's a separate organization that just happens to be on campus and just happens to teach classes to our students. All right, typically these are set up. We've seen some leaked Confucius Institute agreements between universities and the Chinese government. Typically, the host pays for the facilities and a director. So the university will provide the space, provide the classrooms, hire a local director. China will give $150,000 US dollars for startup grant, plus 100,000 US dollars per year. And this seems to be a standard template contract that they use, at least around the Western world. Interestingly, China always talks about internationalizing the yuan and ending the dominance of the US dollar. Doesn't matter where you are in the world, Confucius Institute contracts are in US dollars. China also sends the staff. So they contribute the actual teachers who don't work for the university. They work for the Chinese government, or directly they work for a Chinese partner university paid by the Chinese government. They're employees of the Chinese partner university working in an external and an international university, but still being paid, overseen, promoted by their Chinese university. And this has led to some controversies. For example, Falun Gong members, Falun Gong practitioners have sued Western universities, saying that Confucius Institutes violate the fair work agreements that say you can't discriminate on the basis of religion, because these Confucius Institutes discriminate on the basis of religion. But since the staff come from China, they're not technically employees in the country where they're working. The legal status is vague. Universities are obliged, according to these Confucius Institutes agreements, they're obliged to help help China gain visas for the Confucius Institute staff. It's actually one of the important items. One of the things the host university must do is provide visa support for the Confucius Institute staff, which makes me wonder to what extent Confucius Institute teachers may actually be literal spies. That is, it's quite possible that Confucius Institutes are being used as a cover for espionage, as a way to help get people into host countries who otherwise wouldn't be able to get a visa. It's all very vague and difficult to uncover, because it's all shrouded in secrecy. And I stress shrouded in secrecy not just by China, but by Western universities that host these institutes. All right. But it's hard to see these Confucius Institutes as a major tool of Chinese influence, because they're actually very poorly subscribed. Here at the University of Sydney, where I teach, the Confucius Institute has admitted no students for the last 2 years. Now, of course, that's partly due to coronavirus, but now that we have no restrictions, they're still not offering any classes. They have staff, they have space, they have a director, but they're not actually teaching anybody. Hey, even if they made money, it's tiny. Now, all of the evidence I've been able to ascertain around the world is that Confucius Institutes lose money. Several universities in the US have closed them as loss-making. I know informally, through informal contacts, that our Confucius Institute at the University of Sydney loses money. But even if they made money, it would be tiny. $100,000 a year is irrelevant in the budget of a $2 billion university. I mean, universities like the major Australian universities have an annual revenue of $2 billion US dollars in the case of University of Sydney. So what's $100,000? It can't possibly buy influence. Maybe in Africa or Latin America, the situation is different. If it's difficult to get data on Confucius Institutes in Australia, New Zealand, the United States, and Canada, it's impossible to get data on Confucius Institutes in Latin America, Southeast Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa. Okay. But and on top of that, on top of not making money, Western universities are under increasing political pressure to close Confucius Institutes. That is to say, if the Confucius Institute is a tool of Chinese influence, well, it's also hurting the Australian university. They're not making any money. They're coming under government pressure. So we have to ask, why do so many Australian, US, Canadian universities host Confucius Institutes? I actually think we have to turn the issue of Chinese influence around. Confucius Institutes are not sources of Chinese influence. They're the products of Chinese influence, which is to say that we have Confucius Institutes because the Chinese government goes to a university and says, if you don't host a Confucius Institute, we won't cooperate in other ways. That is, the actual mechanisms of influence are not through the institutes, they're through other means. Now, the visible means that everyone talks about are Chinese students. There are 900,000 Chinese students studying abroad, give or take. That compares to about 300,000 for India. So the total Chinese abroad student population is about 3 times the Indian abroad student population. For some universities, this is a major source of revenue, but not for many. I mean, there are about a dozen in the United States for which Chinese students are a substantial source of revenue. A few in Canada, Toronto, Vancouver, Simon Fraser University. For all other Canadian universities, Chinese students are really a minor component of revenue. Only in Australia and New Zealand is there systemic dependence on Chinese students, meaning that the whole system requires Chinese students to function. My own university has about one third of its student body is Chinese. That's just incredible. We operate as an offshore university for China. And there's a rising dependence in the UK. In the UK, you may remember during the Brexit episode that universities were adamant that they were opposed to Brexit. They strongly went out, we support our staff in their opposition to Brexit. Yet in reality, university vice chancellors in the UK were salivating for Brexit because Brexit meant they no longer had to accept European Union students who paid the same rate as UK students by European Union law, and they could substitute instead Chinese students paying full tuition. And that's exactly what's happened. There's been a massive rise in Chinese student enrollments at UK universities in the last couple of years, despite coronavirus. Okay. But again, I question, are Chinese students really a source of influence? China, first of all, it's only a few universities that have a high level of Chinese students. Second, China has never weaponized its student outflows. That is to say, they've never cut off the supply of students due to anger at a country. In 2017, when the THAAD missile system, the tactical high altitude area defense weapon system, missile system, when South Korea agreed to be a site for the US THAAD missiles, China was very angry. China suspended tourism to South Korea, but it did not interrupt Chinese student flows. Again, in 2020, China issued Australia with a 14-point ultimatum over Australia's call for an international investigation into COVID. China cut off Australian imports of wine, put trade sanctions on Australia. It did not interrupt the flow of Chinese students. So I suspect that although Chinese students could be a mechanism for Chinese influence, they aren't in reality. Which leaves us to the question, why, and we know that Western universities are extraordinarily reluctant to criticize China, do everything possible to keep in China's good graces. Why is that so? In my own research, I've identified the one key area is actually research cooperation. Since 2008, China's 1,000 Talents program, it goes by many names, but the colloquial name is 1,000 Talents, have recruited a large but unknown number of top Western, and I put Western in scare quotes, Western researchers. Some people suggest as many as 100,000. I think that probably includes minor programs that are connected to 1,000 Talents. In any case, tens of thousands of Western researchers. Generally, these are Chinese emigres who work at top Western universities. That is, they're China PRC born. From China's standpoint, they're still PRC citizens. Even if they've taken citizenship in Australia or the US, China doesn't let them give up their Chinese citizenship. And the original idea was to tempt them back to China. So in 2008, the original 1,000 Talents program was a program to entice Chinese-born scholars back to China. But of course, these Chinese-born scholars did not want to give up their tenured positions at Western universities. So instead, 1,000 Talents evolved into a moonlighting program. That is, it evolved into a program where people who had full-time jobs at Western universities also were paid for full-time jobs at Chinese universities. They were typically made a dean, quote unquote. Chinese universities have hundreds of deans, and they were given a lab, sometimes a very big lab. That is, there are people on the 1,000 Talents programs, professors in Australia, United States, and Canada, who are overseeing a lab of 200 people in China, yet maintaining their academic positions in Western countries. Okay. As a result, these labs turn out enormous quantities of research. The lab director, who's based at a Western university, is always listed as one of the authors on the paper. The result is an enormous Chinese subsidy for the journal articles being published by Western universities. If you look at our material science department, our chemistry department, our math department, they're all full of Chinese professors publishing enormous numbers of articles as co-author with their labs back in China. But these agreements are not official agreements. So Australia has a foreign influence program. You have to register these agreements, but you don't have to register them because they're not agreements between the university in Australia and the university in China. They're personal contracts between the academic who happens to work at an Australian university and the institution back in China where they have a staff of 200 people. Okay. As a result, Australian and to a lesser extent, US and Canadian universities are generating enormously increased numbers of research publications. And I'm not saying these aren't small. I mean, it's hard to exaggerate this. According to data from the Australia-China Research Institute, which is a pro-China think tank here in Sydney, Chinese collaborations account for 40%, that's 40% of Australia's highly cited research articles. Highly cited articles go into essentially a database that gets used by international rankings to rank universities. 40% of the entire country's highly cited research is from Chinese universities. Over the last 5 years, just 5 years, 7 years, like time moves on. Since 2015, over the last 7 years, Australia's share of the world's highly cited researchers has doubled from 2% to 4% of the world's highly cited researchers. Now, in some fields, I mentioned mathematics, chemistry, mechanical, material science, the proportion of Australia's highly cited research articles that are collaborations with Chinese universities is 80%. In other words, these highly ranked Australian university departments would not be highly ranked if it weren't for the 1,000 Talents program. Because these are not actual collaborations. These are not Australians collaborating with Chinese people. These are Chinese people in Australia who've been given a lab in China by the Chinese government. This is the great vulnerability that Australian universities are worried about losing. That if they anger China, China at a moment can cut off these research collaborations. And when 40%, and I can't emphasize that number enough, 40% of Australia's nationwide total high prestige research productivity depends on the 1,000 Talents programs, well, there's a lot of incentive for Australian universities to do whatever the Chinese government says. All right. Thank you for letting me present this research. I'm very happy to talk about it, and you cut me off when you're ready to move on.
Yeah, you can. I was thinking another 2-3 minutes if you have anything else.
No, that's the talk, but I'm happy to stay and talk as long as you want.
Absolutely, it is so revealing, and it's always so difficult to understand the Chinese mind. I think what we can understand the Chinese is from their actions, and this particular action of the Chinese in trying to get into institutions worldwide across geographies is an indicator of what they're really up to. And their focus primarily has been on higher education. Their focus has been on research. Their focus has been on innovation across geographies. And what they're doing in Australia is actually a revelation.
But the narrative here in Australia and in the United States, I'm American and I follow the US news closely. The narrative in the US and Australia is that China is stealing Australian research, that it's stealing American research. In reality, it's exactly the opposite. That's what gives the Chinese government so much leverage over Western universities, because it's China that could say, I'm not subsidizing you anymore. The narrative has been exactly the opposite, precisely the opposite of the reality. The reality is China is subsidizing us. That's what gives them power over us.
No, thank you so much. There is no question on the chat box except a comment from Sheshadri Iyengar, who says that the Chinese know how to use the Confucius centers to further the strategic objectives. Universities fall for the financial inducement without realizing that it is a bait. I think in India we became wiser. There is not much support for the second rung espionage centers here.
Well, I want to really emphasize this. It's exactly the opposite. That is, the Confucius Institutes financially are irrelevant for Western universities. Most of them lose money. I suspect, I can't substantiate this, I suspect that the Confucius Institutes are actually tools for getting visas for Chinese spies and intelligence people into the country. That is, they're not teaching. I mean, literally, there are dozens of people working at Confucius Institutes in Sydney who are not teaching anything, who are being paid by the Chinese government, and are hosted by our universities with no work to do. I strongly suspect it's China insisting, if you want to keep your research collaboration, you have to have the Confucius Institute. Because 13 Australian universities out of 39, 1/3 of our universities, still have Confucius Institutes, despite massive Australian government pressure to close them. So there must be some reason why they don't close them. And I suspect Chinese pressure is to keep them open.
Okay, there is one question from Indranil Das. I'll just read out the question. I know we're talking about a common adversary, China, but isn't assessing the Confucian centers with an Orientalist orientation further fuel the Chinese government's apprehension of being insular amongst themselves, even studying abroad? And without discarding the inherent agendas, is it possible to monitor the internal proceedings by introducing legislations in the countries and universities where they are being set up?
Yeah, so first of all, it's not Chinese students who attend the Confucius Institutes. To the extent that they have students at all, it's usually business people. That is, the Confucius Institutes cater to business people wanting to learn business Chinese. That's their top orientation. But I want to emphasize, most of them don't actually run classes. And I know because I registered to be notified. I surreptitiously registered to be notified when new classes would be offered. And my inbox is empty. Their classes simply aren't happening. They're not generating any tuition revenue. They're just sitting there as empty boxes. Now, the problem is Western governments, and the Australian government and the US government, have both treated this as a problem of official ties. And so they've both started regulating universities and pushing them to cut official ties with China. And the problem is that it's the unofficial ties that are the real route of Chinese influence. That is, those 1,000 talent scholars are incredibly important to universities. Most university vice chancellors have somewhere in their contract maintained status as a top 100 university. All of that's based on research rankings. And the vice chancellors know that all of that depends on surreptitious Chinese government support.
Thank you so much, Salvatore. It was indeed in the last half an hour, I think, extremely, all the knowledge which you've shared with us and the questions you've answered, so very revealing. And hope to see you some other time and in some other topic. Thank you from me as the chair, and I'm sure from the organizers. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And next time, please invite me earlier, and I'll book the whole day, because from what I've heard of the conference, I would love to be attending it. Unfortunately, you caught me at short notice, so I apologize that I have to go.
Thank you. See you. Bye-bye.
All right, take care.
Okay, gentlemen, I think the first session was extremely useful, a lot of knowledge shared. And again, we have a very interesting second session, that is the China's three-war strategy. And most of us are aware what it is, a dynamic three-dimensional war fighting, which includes media, that is shaping the public opinion, cyber warfare, and the legal warfare based on documents and maps and etc. And more to say, I think we can't have a better person than General Chakravorty, who's extremely experienced and extremely well read. Chakravorty sir, good to see you once again. We've been close colleagues long back, and we've served together many times. So nice to see you, and welcome on the panel, sir.
Thank you, General Badhani. I hope I am heard clearly because we are having a power problem in the entire state of Haryana, and I have got both my mobile as well as the other aspects ready so that I can talk either on this or on that. I wanted to speak earlier so that at least that I don't get cut off in between.
As a gunner, I'm sure as a hardened gunner, you must be having a backup on
Yeah,
backup.
I have a backup, sir. I have got a backup if the Wi-Fi goes off. I'm telling you, but it will take some time.
Okay.
Firstly, let me be very, very honest. I have traveled by train in China, which very few Indians have done. And this also I've done from a foreign country, and I could get a visa. And therefore, my understanding of China has been, let me put it to you, even the Chinese don't know what China is. Let me put it to you, if you today meet somebody in China and who is in a position of power, he will not be able to answer any question about what China is. It's an enigma, it's opaque, and I have been going to China, I have been studying Chinese, meeting them so often. It's not a question of, just meeting some Confucius Institute or something, meeting their general, meeting their, I'll say, people who are posted over here in New Delhi so often and so this thing. Each one of them speaks English extremely well, but when you come to the hard issues, nobody would come to it. Now, well, if you just want me to, I told the organizers very clearly, if you want to just speak on these three aspects, those three aspects have already gone with the wind. China has moved far, far ahead today. It's not only public opinion, psychology, and getting on to just what you call issues which are pertaining to legal aspects. They have moved well ahead, and they really are today convinced that they possibly are in the era of multi-domain operations. Multi-domain in the first case must be understood, as he said, even the Confucius Institute is a part of their operational setup. It has got nothing to do with academics. The diaspora Chinese who are coming back as researchers are also a part of their soldiers. You will find that when you went to the United States before, you ask anybody, any Chinese, and he would tell you that he comes from Singapore, or he belongs to Malaysia, or he belongs to Philippines. Today, everybody in the United States will give you a place. He belongs to Hainan, or he belongs to Guangzhou, or he belongs to Hong Kong. So the first thing is, the Chinese are very clear that they are possibly the second most powerful nation today, only after the United States. They are also clear that the United States is very reluctant to intervene anywhere physically. Now, this leads them to the area which they feel the US is trying to perfect, and that is the area of multi-domain operations. I must say, having read a lot and met a lot of Americans, I don't think even they have perfected themselves in multi-domain. And when we talk of multi-domain, it's the land, sea, air, the underwater, the outer space, cyber, psychological, legal, economic, and even possibly the electricity problem today in Gurgaon can be attributed to the Chinese. They have been able to enter our power grid at least 3 times last year. 3 to 4 times is the official admission. There is nothing that they are now not planning. They are planning that how the pay of the army officers can be stopped, how the pay of the pensions can be stopped, how systems can be introduced which will ensure that the main backbone of the what you call India, which happens to be the armed forces, are in a constant state of mental problems by ensuring their pay and allowances, leave, and other systems are there. How power can be involved. So, really speaking, they are taking multi-domain beyond economic warfare, beyond what you call, even they are interfering with the railway trains which are moving. They are interfering with the reservations as far as the airlines are concerned. And lastly, even many DRDO sites and others are constantly being hacked. I'm sorry, I'm just what you call got into something else, but I'll just come back just a moment. Yeah, there you are. Now you can make out even while I am talking, there are issues coming in. There are Times of India coming in. I do not know how they enter, but they keep entering, and they have selected people who possibly they suspect know more than what they are supposed to know, and they get on to it. Now I want to talk about something which I want to share with you. What is the thrust of China? Is it looking at cyber? Is it looking at continental? Is it looking at legal? Is it looking at psychological? Is it looking at what you call, shall we put it, the public opinion? Or is it looking at a comprehensive approach where they will do what they feel like? I think the best way to understand is not what they act, but what they have acted. They don't firstly bother for anybody in this world. Let's say today the South China Sea, that what you call International Court of Justice, passed an arbitration. They put it in the nearest shredder. Their belief in the world is might is right. Whatever China does is right. You heard the previous speaker speak about the Confucius. Let me tell you, none of these institutes are interested in teaching anybody. And no doubt, recently in Pakistan, 3 of the Chinese of the Confucius Institute were attacked, because none of them are keen on making money. China has enough money to feed all of us. So therefore, their idea is very clear. They have now started deciding who are their threats. And this is best indicated by Foreign Minister Wang Yi, who just recently made a secret visit to India. Now, mind you, if it has to be secret to India, that means the Indian government definitely knew he is coming. But we ensured it was a secret. Before that, one day before, in front of all the Islamic conference, he spoke about Kashmir. He landed over here, not one point did he agree, which was on the agenda. And he made sure that he came here, he was well received, he was heard, and he went back. Now look at the power of this nation. It can do what it feels like diplomatically anywhere, and everybody is prepared to accommodate them, including the United States, Russia, India, everywhere. As far as they look at the world, what do they see? Now they see that United States is the number one country, which is reluctant today to act. As far as Asia is concerned, they see possibly 3 countries which can militarily challenge them. One is Japan, which has got a very, very small self-defense force. Second is what you call Vietnam, and the third is India. So as per them, these 2 countries always need to be kept under pressure. And what you mean by pressure is you constantly make sure that whatever they apply for, if they are in the United Nations, you oppose them. If they want to enter anything on the high table, oppose them. If they are talking about Kashmir, you oppose them. If they are talking about terrorism, you oppose them. And thereafter make sure that every program which is going on is interfered. Now the best part is they have been able to penetrate the Western world, the European Union, in a big way. As far as the United States is concerned, well, Trump did manage to bring about what is known as some control on the trade. But as far as the universities, you heard the previous speaker speaking, all US universities encourage Chinese scholars to come and their scholars to go to China. Now, this is the major place where intelligence is shared. Let me tell you, all over the world, the best people, carriers of intelligence, are those who are scientists and professors. No person wearing a uniform is allowed either by his own force or by the others, having been posted abroad on a specific thing, to deal with all these issues. But certainly, as far as China is concerned, they look at these universities. What you call China is also dominating the entire, if you put it, Hollywood has practically come under their control. They are dominating many, many institutions in the United States and Canada and Mexico in the North American front. As far as India is concerned, the less said, the better. There is nothing we can do without Chinese. You may, if you the only thing is you're going to go deeper. When you start going deeper and deeper, you'll see that, okay, you buy an Apple computer, you'll find 85% of the parts are today made in China. You take a Boeing aircraft which lands over here, 80% of the components are made in China. And therefore, as far as Europe is concerned, most of the components are still made in China. They have reached such a big stage as far as technology is concerned that, really speaking, they are now in a stage where they have started innovating. They are no longer in the catch-up stage. As far as copying is concerned, well, everybody learns by, shall I put it first, in copying, then we imitate. Whoever is the learner, first you copy, then you imitate, then you catch up, and finally you innovate. Even when a child goes to school, he follows this process. So therefore, for us to say that China is copying or the US is, everybody is copying everybody. Everybody is imitating everybody. Everybody is today using is what you call network for further innovation. So China definitely is looking at all this. And now, what is important is, in the Indian vision, if you look at it, when you look at it at a non-kinetic way, just look at it how China is dealing with you. Already Pakistan is in dire straits. They have got a lovely, what you call, shall I put it, okay, we'll call it as a Chinese, what you call civilian port at Gwadar. We have Sri Lanka today, which is in absolute shambles. They are our neighbor, they are hardly any distance away. And today you don't know whether they are coming or going. Next, let's move on to the third country, Myanmar. Myanmar is today in a state which is under total Chinese control. Next, let's move to Nepal. Nepal today, we are lucky Sher Bahadur Deoba is still continuing, but the projects which are going on, having visited Nepal myself and having seen them, believe me, the speed with which they are going and the way they are undertaking, Nepal is compelled to depend on China. Now we are left with one country, Bangladesh. I've covered all the neighbors, and Bhutan I will not cover because that's known. Bangladesh, for a long time, India was the biggest trading partner. Today, when you look at it, as far as Bangladesh is concerned, China has become the biggest trading partner. Every aspect, bulk 75% of the weapons in the Bangladesh army, we really don't know for what these weapons are needed, other than internal security or possibly against Myanmar. But today, when they are getting submarines, when they're getting all these other high-tech weaponry, 75% is coming from China. So therefore, when you look at it, you're just left with Maldives, which again, we do not know whether someday it is here, someday it is there. Now, the most important point, I often ask people, do we know how many islands does India have? I haven't got the question today. I've asked people how many islands are there in the Andaman and Nicobar system. I have not got an answer. I've gone to Hong Kong and asked people how many islands come under Hong Kong. Believe me, I have the number. We even don't have the data of what we own and what we don't own. Now, why is it important? Because what is China's belief? Is it going to fight a war? It is going to creep into you. Like I was posted in Vietnam when the South China Sea started. It started with a very, very gradual way. Look at the way they have creeped in, and today they have built bases over there, everything over there, and imagine India has got today offshore assets in the South China Sea, but we are still reluctant today to go to Vietnam and take hold of Cameron Bay and at least start our training over there. Very lucky that Philippines has brought the BrahMos missile. I only hope similar actions can be taken by us. If we don't move on to the Chinese border, we are already surrounded. We are already dominated. You'll say, yes, we are countering. We are a powerful country. Definitely powerful. Because everybody who is in the Indian army, like General Badhani, will today fight in the border till he dies. That is a big thing, which no other country has such an armed force. But that alone doesn't give you power. Power is your economic power. Power is your ability to influence. Power is ability to hold on to your islands. Do we have that capability? Well, we have got to possibly understand that we need to understand what we are as a nation, what is our data, how do we get hold of our immediate neighborhood, and how do we get now going beyond into the Pacific Ocean. See, it's an India Pacific, and I often asked even the previous Chief of Defense Staff, I will give you the date exactly. I think it was 27th November, place IDSA, when he addressed us in a meeting. I said very clearly, when we say that our boundary or area of interest is from the east coast of Africa to the Malacca Straits, we have already discounted what our assets are in the South China Sea. We have oil fields over there. Unless we move it there, his answer was very clear. The moment I do that, the naval budget goes up. Now we are still thinking in terms of army budget, naval budget, who is becoming what. So long as you keep thinking like that, I think we will never go forward. We have to think as a nation where exactly brought out that a Confucius Institute person is also a soldier. He is not there to teach, by the way, Mandarin to anybody. He is there today to increase the Chinese influence to get more visas. Now, coming up to it, we have a large number of medical students who possibly will now get a Chinese visa. So, therefore, what is our way forward? Our way forward, I think, is definitely we must look at it that China, as far as they are concerned, we've gone beyond all those three things we just spoke of. I think that was possibly when Deng came to power, public opinion, psychological, and legal. They have gone beyond that. Right now, they are looking at outer space. They are focusing on 4I. They have enough satellites over you. As luck would have it, the Indian Army does not have a single satellite today. The Navy has one satellite. The Air Force has one satellite. That is our level of surveillance we have today. We are very happy we could land last night an Indigo aircraft with Indian directional systems. Okay, and possibly we need to go way ahead in terms of artificial intelligence, quantum, in terms of economic development, and lastly, to really understand what do we want to do with China. Well, it's a big issue. I've written so many books. My last book has just been released yesterday, which is Technologies for the Indian Army, Keeping the Chinese Technology. I would, sir, now just wind up here so that I leave it to the chair to ask if there's any issues to be sorted out, I can answer.
Sir, thank you so much. Finishing exactly on the dot. I think it's an extremely enlightening talk. And thank you for sharing so much of information, as usual, calling a spade a spade. Like you said, from the traditional three war strategies, I think we have graduated to much more. And if we do not understand where China is going, then it will be our loss. And one of them certainly is cyber. And you had made a mention that we are getting hit, and we are likely to get hit in all the infrastructural domain, from railways to air to power to many other things. We have Pavithran Rajan, once again, a very, very dear friend and a colleague, and extremely professional person. And I think he is the right man today to talk about China and cyber. We couldn't have asked for anyone better, Pavithran. Welcome, Pavi, and the floor is yours. Please try and wind up in 15 to 20 minutes. And thereafter, in case there are any questions, we'll have 10 more minutes. Our session is up to 3.350. We have time, but request you to wind up in about 20 minutes. Over to you.
Thank you so much, sir. Honestly, sir, I'm privileged that I'm following two very eminent speakers who have done a wonderful job presenting their overview. So let me try and show this presentation. So that's my first challenge. Let me see. So cyber warfare, how do you define it? There are many, many definitions. So I've taken this particular one. It is aggregate of all competitive activities in cyberspace which are taken by organs of the nation, including advanced persistent threat groups against other countries. And then if that is cyber warfare, what is cyber crime? What are the differences? So I have created my own definition. Cyber crimes exploit the backdoors and vulnerabilities of the software and hardware, while cyber warfare is more about exploiting the front door. The back doors are exploited only when the front door is shut. So I've just tried to make this. So what do I mean by this? During the course of the rest of the lecture, I think it will become much more clear to you. So, okay, let me jump into 3 maps. This is basically show the maritime trade routes to China, and you will find the importance of Malacca Straits. Use QS Malacca Straits and use QS China. That shows why China is doing this, creating the BRI routes, the sea lanes, CPEC, then those overland, routes to Europe, all to escape this Malacca stranglehold. There is even talk of creating a polar Silk Road if the Arctic ice melts enough. Now I come to slightly more focus of this phenomena called command of the commons. So this was the commons. The command of the commons is the key enabler of US power. It was first posited by Professor Barry Posen of the MIT. So the commons, they say, is the connective tissue. Let me try and, what is a commons? A space in the international system over which states do not exercise the normal prerogatives of sovereignty, and to which norms provide for universal access for economic, political, scientific, cultural, and sometimes military purposes for those states with the requisite technological capabilities. So you got the high seas, you got the air, you got outer space, Antarctica. These are all commons. Now, I had written a paper back in 2014 when I was trying to make people understand why cyberspace is so important. And in that year, those were the figures. In 2000, the global trade was 18 trillion. By sea, 70% by value and 80% by volume. Air, 20% by value and 1% by volume. And land, 10% by value and 19% by volume. But I dug out this too. At that time, there was US dollar 10 trillion per day transactions on SWIFT. This would have multiplied multifold as on date. I have not tried to research because what are the correct value of SWIFT? Because authentic figures are very, very difficult to get. There's a lot of opacity, and what you dig out also might not be the correct thing. What is published might not be the correct thing. But in any case, this gives you the central, the importance of cyberspace. So when you look at cyberspace, all the global critical infrastructure in the information age, you take any sector, okay, you have it, agriculture, food, water, public health, emergency services, government, defense industrial, your stock exchanges, your banking, everything is connected to cyberspace. And that is now very evident as to why cyberspace has been described as the strategic high ground of the 21st century. And it explains the reasons for the US budget for cybersecurity being larger than the nuclear weapons budget. And the Chinese multiple times saying that we need to concentrate on cyberspace and information warfare. Now, the first to describe the existence of a commons in cyberspace was Vice Admiral Arthur Zabriskie. So cyberspace is an artificial domain, unlike the natural domains. This is artificial, created by the US, DARPA, who created the internet. But, and he compared the cyberspace commons to the maritime commons of the 19th and 20th century. Because in the 19th and 20th century, whoever had the best navy could dominate the world. But he said that in the 21st century, who will dominate cyberspace will control the globe. Okay, there are some characteristics, etc., which is there. But for want of time, I will not dwell too much into it. But I'm, if anyone wants to connect to me directly, I'm always available. So, who controls the internet? There are a lot of, data or narratives which say, oh, the globe is flat, the world is flat, now it's a global village, and the internet is not controllable. But the truth is, the internet is absolutely controllable. It's controlled by the Rootzone servers, okay? And there are 13 of them. There are instances of these, thousands of instances of these root servers, but they are instances. If the main servers are shut down, the internet's shut down, okay? and that is controlled through the DNS this. So out of the 13, 10 are in the US because they created it. They've given one to UK, they've given one to Europe, and one to Japan. The rest of the world is susceptible. They say if you get, like for example, Indian internet, if it's get access is cut to the Rootzone servers, after about a week, the internet, your entire digital economy will collapse. Anyway, these Rootzone servers are controlled by ICANN. It's an organization which was initially under the US Commercial Department. But after Snowden, because of a lot of intense pressure, it was moved out, and they say now it's multi-stakeholderism. Multi-stakeholderism means a lot of NGOs, this, that, etc., are part of this ICANN board of board. But physical control is what is real control, right? So it's still under basically under Western control. The Chinese and the US and the Russians, and initially the Indians too. We had been repeatedly asking that this entire Rootzone server should come under the control of the UN, ITU. Not been agreed to. Of late, we have started talking about multi-stakeholderism. Now, the realities of today was brought up by Snowden. All the iconic companies, are collaborating surreptitiously with the US deep state. Now, I mentioned all these parts so that we understand what China is up to. So the strategic deception, including China, was taken in. Although Chinese had created this, Great Wall of China and, had a walled garden for their internet, they did not understand the amount of penetration of the US industry and the US deep state was. And the strategic deception for the globe was because we tend to ape. We are great apes. We tend to ape, and nations also ape. Since we noticed that the Europeans were blindly accepting all these things, we said, okay, that's the way to go, jump into it. Without examining the underlying strategic things, we jumped into the era of the internet, and Y2K, that Y2K demand made that this was the fastest growing segment of the Indian economy. So we blindly have jumped into this particular field. Okay, no one had any idea about what the internet and this IT was all about. But remember that the people did not even have an idea of data. After Snowden, people from the Europe challenged the safe harbor principles under which the European data used to flow to the US. It was upheld. Immediately, Privacy Shield was bought in. That's also been stuck. Will come in. That's the power of money and influence. But other than the European Union, countries in Europe have got their individual laws. You'll realize that some of them have gone for stringent data localization. Okay, and any nation who can effectively garner and process a huge information flows of cyberspace will have a competitive advantage in all spheres, be it military, diplomacy, trade, etc. Now I come back to China. What about China in cyber warfare? That's the biggest market in cyberspace, 1 billion plus population online. Because of the inherent mistrust of the West, they had created the Great Firewall of China to ensure that Chinese data stays out there and the Westerners don't have their data on China, which helped them create big companies. Although we claimed that we were a superpower in software, just about 10 years back, we used to claim that. Today, no one makes this claim. China has arrived. And the narrative was all about economic espionage by the Chinese. Okay. And the US surveillance was for the global war on terrorism, is the narrative which has been pushed. But the fact is, both these countries are trying to compete and trying to get those data flows. Huawei Retd. Till the time the 5G did not come in and Huawei had taken stolen a march over the Western companies, they used to talk about certifications, blah, 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 etc. Second, Huawei went ahead, no certifications. Immediately the narrative changed. Then as out, we can't allow Chinese equipment to come in. But we did not. We bought into a lot of these narratives. And today, because of that, we are in a little bit of deep trouble. So this I'd try to, if you look at, even Russians initially had totally bought into the free internet narrative. But only when they started seeing that social media helped topple regimes in the Middle East and Northern Africa did they start taking, precautions. In 2015, after Snowden, China passed a legislation, extending Chinese sovereignty into cyberspace and calling for network technology to be controllable. Digital sovereignty. They were the first guys to do that. Now, when you talk about cyber warfare, what is in the news is mostly espionage. Okay, hacking. They call it hacking, which everyone does to a limited extent. But if you own the appliances, if you own the platforms, you don't need to do any hacking because you own it. You get the data as it is from the front door. If you examine Chinese military literature on how their particular, cyber warfare or electronic warfare is going to take place, their primary aim in any war is they need to, ensure that the sensor networks of the opponent needs to be taken out. Upset the OODA loop. Okay, that's their primary aim. So is the primary aim for the US. They basically, copied the US. So they look at the space assets. They look at your networks, national trunk lines, etc. We, by strategic myopia, have handed it over to Huawei and Retd. I can't think of a bigger blunder than this. But the aim, what is the final aim? The aim is to win without fighting. Information superiority. Okay, they plan that they understand that future wars or even current wars will all be in all domains simultaneously: ground, air, sea, and electromagnetic. We are still stuck on the three services concept because this takes a whole of a nation approach. We have still not managed to achieve synergy between the three forces. China also has brought in a national intelligence law and data security law. Okay, they clearly brought in an open law where it says that all Chinese citizens and companies, okay, and this law has extraterritorial reach. That means every Chinese appliance, every Chinese smartphone, every Chinese Wi-Fi, all these have to help China protect their national interest. It's period. There is no doubt about what they're trying to say. But if that be so, why are we allowing our companies not to come up and replace China? We are trying, but we are very slightly late in the race. And we are trying. What we are trying to today do is trying to replace this with Western equipment, which is, I don't think that would be the correct way to go about it. What are Chinese aims? They clearly said digital Silk Road. So many the nations which have worked in green are countries which have already signed on for the digital Silk Road. Okay, they've said that they will cooperate with China and allow Huawei and City, etc., to come in. In fact, our 5G, there was a committee which was headed by a former naval officer today, who is not a very eminent gentleman, who is not an Indian citizen, but because of the evidence was given this, and he also advocated that Huawei should be allowed to come into India. So that is where we are. We've still not got our basic ideas correctly. Now, if you look at this, these are the countries which China has already penetrated, okay, including India. Why that India is there? Because our largest number of smartphones, etc., are Chinese. It's clearly been brought out that the smartphones are being sold below cost price, and the losses for the companies are being made up by top-ups. It's a clear intelligence operation, but they still flourish. They sponsor our cricket teams. They do political contributions. They, I don't know when we, recently even when the standoff with China was there on the LAC, the ISRO went ahead and signed a, MOU with them for putting our NAVIC systems on the Chinese smartphones. Their excuses, where are the Indian smartphones? So this is a study of 2020 cyber power rankings, okay, by the Harvard Kennedy School. Now that study, which is one of the first comprehensive plot of cyber power is concerned, they said
which slide are you showing?
Cyber power rankings, sir. Or has it got stuck?
Yeah, I think it got stuck. We are on the slide on national intelligence, law, and data security.
Oh, okay, sir. Now that's what happens when you're on some other. It's a change now. So cyber power rankings.
No, it has not.
I don't know what to do now.
Slide, I think we did not see.
Okay, so let me exit this. After I exited it, is there a change?
Yeah, now the
Yes.
that thing is come on the side, so you can go back again. Select the correct slide which you
Okay,
want.
cyber power rankings. Can you see it?
Yeah, now we can. Yes.
Yeah. So this is a graph which shows cyber intent index and the cyber capability index. So the tier one state, as far as in the cyber power, they've made it into 3 tiers. Okay. In tier one, the only state is the United States. You will see it somewhere to the right side, green. But if you look at it, China is in tier two, okay, along with UK, France, Germany, Russia, Israel, etc. But China is higher in the cyber intent. Now, India occupies somewhere in, lacking in intent. Okay, that lacking in intent is huge, huge, blow to, this is in spite of our Atmanirbhar, push. Now, why is that so? Now, here is this is the OSI model. Okay, all ICT equipment works on this OSI model, divided into 7 layers. First is the physical, second is data, network, transport, session, presentation, and 7 is application. So the entire global innovation, which is in the commercial space, concentrate on application model. Okay, there is a lot of money if you create good applications. There is no money in the physical and the rest of this. So 2 to 6 is controlled by the operating systems, and 1 is chips. These are places where the profit is not there and no one will fund you. Okay, but unless you control the first 2 6, you have no control over layer 7. So China created a very interesting model for the global markets. They rode on the American, 1 to 6. The 1, they still not got their act together, but 2 to 6, that is the OS for the internal Chinese market, has always been Chinese. Okay, 2 different, at least they understood what is the model. In India, we've still not got it together. I've seen that the army has come out and the government has come out with saying, oh, we have got an encrypted app. The encrypted app is on the layer 7. That encrypted app is totally controlled by the rest of the layers. If you don't have control over the rest of the layers, you can't control, it's not encrypted anymore. Okay, because the operating system will see it. And okay, the whole thing rests on the chip, but do we wait till the chips come up before we control layer? At least the government has started talking about we need an indigenous OS. So what is cyber warfare all about? This one slide captures it. Okay, cyber warfare is control and hegemony over all the particular military infrastructure, political economy, industry, and intangible networks. Okay, all of this control over that. Who establishes control over all these networks will be able to rule. In case a war escalates to the kinetic domain, then you will always be, the OEM is king, and he will always be able to switch off. Okay, they'll just brick it, and there's no way anyone using a graphic user interface, computer expert, or a wizard can do anything about it. Okay, so this is the world. The Americans have ensured that no one goes below layer 1 by the money power. China, second, whoever was kicked out, they said they will make their own OS for the world. There it has come. We have not even understood what is this fight all about. So there, what is, this is Yuval Noah Harari. I said it slightly before Yuval Noah, but no, because I'm a small man. Yuval is a great guy. So second, he said it, that when you have enough data, you don't need to send soldiers in order to control a country. Fight is all about data. Okay, so he says, he gives an example. When the data giants in San Francisco or Shanghai could compile the entire medical and personal history of politicians and officials in distant countries and use it to influence them or manipulate public opinion about them, they will then control nations. You don't need wars anymore. The whole fight is about that. So where is the data? The data is mostly in social networks, operating systems, and cloud services. These are the 3 places, okay, which both China and US had, concentrating on. Who controls all these 3 places? The social networks, the operating systems, and the cloud. That's where the data is. They will dominate the globe. We have started now investing in clouds, etc., but the building blocks of the clouds are again Western. our our UPI, our Aadhaar, everything is created all on Western hardware and software. So the entire emphasis on digital India is a subsidy to Western US power.
Pavi, you request you to wind up in about next 3-4 minutes, please.
Yes, sir. Next 2 minutes, sir. So the PAR, okay, this is PAR. 2021, September 7. This is how the world looks like. Can you imagine a company of Apple at 2.8 trillion, like the Indian economy? You look at the PAR. Yes, there are two. Tencent is the only company which is in the top. Aramco is a Saudi Arabian country. Rest everything is and then TSMC is there, Taiwanese company. Rest everything is US. So what is this all about? What is the fight all about? I've just taken a slide from the Snowden revelations and put it over there. It clearly says, let's be blunt, they gained a lot of influence and made a lot of money via drafting of the earlier standards. The US was a major player in shaping today's internet. This resulted in pervasive exploitation of American culture as well as technology and a lot of money. That is what political power. Finally, everything is to wealth, right? So this is my last slide.
Your slide is again stuck. We are on the data colonialism slide. Yeah.
Now, okay. Yeah. Now, okay. So you didn't say this slide, sir.
No,
so
we
this
didn't.
slide. Yeah. So I will just. This is very crucial. So I'll show you the slide. So this was a slide which I read out about what is the whole fight about. Okay. It's all about wealth. And this is the last slide. Okay. Clausewitz. The most decisive act is judgment which the statements and the general exercise rightly to understand the war in which he engages. I so thank you, Indic, and all of you for taking out your time and giving me this opportunity. So back to the chair. I will stop sharing, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pavi. I mean, as always, extremely informative, extremely enlightening, and thank you for sparing your time. It's always a pleasure to listen to you.
Thank you, sir.
Today we had, I think, in this session, extremely useful 3 topics. The first one by Salvatore on the global academic institutions and China's influence, and how he brought out over 600 Confucius Institutes and over 900,000 Chinese students studying abroad, and the whole thing he packaged in extremely very concise and very good information. The second by General Chakravorty on 3 war strategies, and how from the conventional strategies of public opinion, cyber warfare, and media and data, we have moved on to something more intrusive, something more dynamic as far as China is concerned. Unless we are very careful in this, it will be our loss. And finally, Pavi, he brought out so much of information for all of us. At least for me, it was very informative. And thank you, Pavi, and thank you, panel. Thank you, General Chakravorty, for sharing all your knowledge. I have finished, and I think we finished on time. Thank you.
I thank our session chair and each and every key speakers for such an engaging and enlightening session, and providing a better insights on China's non-kinetic warfare and multi-domain approach. With this, we have come to an end of our 5th session, and stay tuned for our next session on decoding China's geopolitical ambitions. Thank you for joining.